My name is Julia Payne. I'm director of The Hub. We're a social enterprise working in the arts, and we do two things. We do all the kinds of consultancy that you would expect a normal consultancy firm to do, and we use the money that we make from that to fund what we call Hub Lab projects that we develop ourselves, that are driven by two things really: curiosity and anger. Curiosity to try to understand things that we don't understand very well, and things that we are a bit cross about that we want to have a go at fixing. So that's a little bit about what we do. I'd like to introduce Andy, who is my co-host today from Mindapples. Andy, would you like to say a little bit about Mindapples?
Hello, yeah, nice to be back with you. Quite a few familiar names and faces, so you know a bit about what we do, I assume. But for anyone joining us for the first time, then if you want to know more about our work, we're at mindapples.org. You will find all kinds of things there that we do. We are a social enterprise that encourages and supports people to take better care of their minds. And so a lot of our work over this year has been trying to support people during the pandemic, but we're generally interested in trying to help us all understand our minds, understand each other's minds, and apply all these insights to our health, our work, our relationships. So lots to do this year, lots been going on, but I've been really enjoying these the Balance Talks, chance to talk to you all about some of the things we've learned, share that with you, and talk a bit about what you figured out as well. So really nice to be back with you.
Great, thanks Andy. Yeah, and as Andy said, today's talk is part of a series of talks that we've been doing as part of the Balance programme. We've been doing them since June this year in partnership with the Creative Industries Federation and Mindapples. And our goal really is to help freelancers, creative freelancers, entrepreneurs, artists to balance their minds and their books. So we've got this kind of dual focus on kind of protecting your mental health and also helping you think a little bit about how to have a sustainable business. I also say it's the end of the year. I feel like we should say a thank you also to the funders of the very first set of talks that we did, Colchester Borough Council and South East Creators. We definitely wouldn't still be here in December if they hadn't helped us get there in the first place. So a little bit about today's session. It's been quite a year, as we all know. Everybody's had a very personal sort of individual journey through 2020, but I think it's probably fair to say that for a lot of us, it's been something of a roller coaster of a year, you know, kind of emotional ups and downs, not just every day, but sometimes it feels like every hour. But we're all here. And I think for many of us, one of the interesting things about 2020 is that it's actually given us a chance to kind of pause and reflect and maybe even reset some of those things that had become default behaviors and ways of thinking. So when Andy and I were talking about this session, we thought as we look forward to 2021 and we're all facing a really different, still quite uncertain future, it would perhaps make sense to spend a bit of time thinking about 2020 and maybe if there are things from 2020 that we want to take forward, that we want to carry forward. And if in doing that and reflecting on that, whether it makes us think that there may be some opportunities to build new and more sustainable ways of working in 2021. So I guess it's a case of sort of taking stock of the current year and looking ahead to the next year. And to do that, we're going to be thinking a little bit about habits, and intentions, and also a little bit about gratitude, and then thinking a little bit about sort of our hopes for 2021, about how we want to work and live, and maybe for the creative sector at large. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going to cover today. And I wanted Andy to kick us off really by starting with that one of those last things that I talked about, which is gratitude. And we hear a lot about how cultivating gratitude can be transformational in so many ways for our mental health. And I suspect that lots of people maybe have been, dashing to Amazon or Etsy or wherever it is that they've gone to buy their Christmas presents to buy someone a gratitude journal. I suspect there's been a lot of that going on in the last few weeks. But I wondered if you could kick us off by talking a little bit about why, from a mental health point of view, there's such power in cultivating a sense of gratitude.
Yeah, it's an interesting year to be talking about it, to be honest. I think it's one of those things where it came out, a lot of the research on gratitude comes out of the world of positive psychology, and I think there's been points over the years, I think, where positive psychology, in my view, has slightly lost its way because it's become so much focused on positive thinking and trying to be cheerful all the time. And actually, the roots of it are not about that. It's much more about understanding the mind, trying to figure out what our minds are like when they're at their best, and to try and push towards cultivating more of that. And I think it's probably best to see gratitude in that frame, rather than thinking whatever's going on, you must always be grateful, you know, the classic mustn't grumble thing. of endlessly saying, "Oh well, this is all awful, isn't it?" But I mustn't grumble. I must endlessly be trying to think about what I'm grateful for. And it can be difficult after a year like this to think, "Oh well, we haven't had it so bad." But of course, the thing with that is that it's a distortion. It is a form of bias, that it comes from our attention on what needs to be changed, on the things that we need to fix, the problems that we want to address. And so it's one way to think of it, particularly in a year like this, is it's especially useful when your mind is full of problems and threats and difficulties and things that you need to take action about, do stuff about, that you're worrying about. That's actually often when it's most important to try and also balance that out by thinking, actually, what is good here? What are the things that I'm glad that I have? And it partly plays a role in planning. And so if we're thinking what we want to be, life to be and work to be like in 2021, a lot of it's about trying to identify the things we want to keep, the things that we want to protect. And so actually being grateful for those things is a good way of focusing our attention on them and not overlooking them, because otherwise you can end up chasing new things and then realize that you've lost something that actually you really liked. And we need to take care and pay attention to those. So it's a good way of just focusing the mind on what we want to keep from the year, what we want to protect and hang on to. The other thing that I think I may have mentioned briefly before, but I think is my theory on why I think gratitude is particularly helpful, is that Daniel Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize for his work on prospect theory and wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow, a lot of his research is around intuition and how we assess whether things are going well, whether we're pleased with our decision making. And his argument, which I find very convincing, it's a difficult thing to prove, but he suggests that he thinks intuition evolved from perception, from visual search. So whenever you are looking at a scene, you will see the changes, the things that move. You see it, look out on at the world, and you see things that move. So something comes into your frame of reference and it immediately calls your attention away. And he thinks that our intuition works a bit like that too, that we fixate on changes and we ignore maintained states. So we end up overlooking the things that are always there with us, the things that stay the same in the background, and we don't factor those things in enough into our decision making. So my view on it is it's not just about trying to be optimistic, it's actually about trying to make better choices, to try and figure out what we want to design in terms of how we're going to rebuild and build back better, as they say. And gratitude provides a great way of saying, actually, what this year has made me realize is I'm really glad I have this, I'm really glad I have that, this is really important to me. So it's a good way of thinking about what matters to us, I think.
It's interesting what you said about the Daniel Kahneman thing, because one of the things that I guess I've been thinking about a lot this year, certainly as in the last few months, is the sense I have a real sense that the mundane, I don't know, how mundane everyday life has become for lots of us. It makes it really hard sometimes to feel that sense of gratitude because there's just nothing new. So it's interesting to hear you talk about the kind of the everyday stuff and the fact that we ignore that. Is that about the idea of things being hidden in plain sight, that there's so much kind of background noise going on that we can't focus on the positives, do you think, of the everyday?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, it's the idea of things being hidden in plain sight speaks a bit to our attention systems, the tendency that we have to look to narrow in the sort of spotlight attention which we have, where we're looking at one particular thing and not necessarily seeing all the peripheral stuff. The gorilla video is the classic one for that. Our capacity to ignore very obvious things because we're fixated on this one particular thing. And I think one thing that I've noticed over this year is that I've had points where I'm very fixated on what I'm worried we might lose, but also on kind of what I need to do in response, trying to keep people safe. But actually trying to step back from that and think about how my position is relative to other people, the trying to remember that actually we can switch things online. Actually, if we were doing different kinds of work, if I was a physical trainer, if I was doing personal training advice, I wouldn't be able to do as much over Zoom, but they're better off than people who are working in galleries who could have to shut, and there's a whole sequence of people who are having different experiences. The phrase in the New York Times recently that I really liked was, it's become clear that we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. And so trying to actually take stock, and rather than just fixating on the horizon and the waves, to actually look at the boat and go, what boat am I in? Actually, this isn't a bad boat. This is relatively sturdy. This is, it's not the perfect thing, but it will get me through. Is quite a nice sort of frame, I think, to think about it.
Yeah, and that's, I think, speaks to one of the things that I like about sort of thinking, from from a position of gratitude is that it brings you back to the here and the now. And there's something, it kind of stops you worrying about, the past or the future, that sort of thing. And for me, it kind of grounds you in the present. And there's something, I don't know what this is from a neurological point of view, or even if it stands up scientifically, but it feels like it slows my brain down a bit. And then I'm using less energy. So there's something about the gratitude thing which stops my brain from doing this. And so therefore I'm not spinning so much, or there's, I'm using less energy, more energy to do the exciting stuff, the important stuff.
Yeah, some of this relates to the things we talked about previously about mood, that we can get into loops of rumination and worry. And so partly it's trying to interrupt those habits of thinking about what might go wrong, thinking about things that you're annoyed about or frustrated by. So sometimes it's just a matter of trying to calm down some of those loops, which absorb a lot of energy. They just tire us out because we spend a lot of time worrying about it. There's some quite interesting research that I saw years ago, which was that people who are quite depressed have quite often show enhanced parts of the brain for memory recall, because they're doing so much recalling of things that are the reasons why they're feeling upset or worried. And so it becomes quite a drain, actually. It's like having this sort of extra process running. So in some ways, it's not even about the kind of intellectual side. It's partly about practicing those parts of you that are kind of recalling the positive memories, trying to think about the things that you're glad about. And actually Kahneman thought his argument is that we don't actually really want good experiences. What we want is good memories. What we want when we talk about having a happy life, we want to be able to look back on our life and think, yes, I'm very pleased with these things. I'm glad of these moments. And so recalling those moments actually makes you realize that your life is maybe happier than you're thinking when you're trying to fight off the next, tax deadline or whatever it might be.
Oh, don't say tax deadline.
I'm sorry.
That's January. That's January.
I'm sorry. No, forget about that. Be grateful that it's not January.
Exactly. So you mentioned there habits, and you talked about practice. So I wonder, on a very practical note, are there any ways that you could recommend for cultivating that sense of gratitude? I mean, particularly in a year like this, where it can be hard to kind of summon that gratitude. Any tips?
Yeah, the classic one is gratitude journals, which does seem to show fairly good responses when people do it. Just all the three things you're grateful for at the end of the day is the simplest form of it. And it doesn't have to be just I'm going to be grateful now. People get it through prayer. People get it through mindfulness. There's all kinds of different ways that you can do that. So part of it is about that. I would say, beyond that, there are different routes into it for different people. One thing that is quite an interesting finding in some of the positive psychology research is that sharing joy with people embeds the memory better. So it's not just about a solitary activity, it's about trying to talk with other people. And then you hear other people talking about what they're grateful for, you start thinking, actually, yeah, I've got that too. And actually to be with people who are glad that things are good for you, and can celebrate your successes and feel good that you're feeling good, that creates a bit of a positive loop. So I think we tend to focus on the individual side of it, but there's perhaps a bit more collective activity that we could do, and it's something that's at the core of how we do all the Mindapples campaign, is trying to publish what we want more of. So if we want people to look after their minds, let's publish all the things that people are doing to look after their minds and promote more of that. So I think anything where we're able to all share the things that we're grateful for, you start to see this sort of encourages that habit, I suppose, as we're going to talk about later on, that habit of thinking, actually, yeah, I've thought about all the things that I'm frustrated about, all the things I'm worried about, but what am I glad I've got? What do I want to keep? What do I want to hang on to and protect? That conversation, I think, is one that we could have more.
The gratitude journal thing is interesting because I periodically will try that and manage it for a few days and then kind of give up. And I think it's interesting. I think it's because I try to do it at the end of the day, and sometimes I'm just so tired. It's like all I'm grateful for is going to bed. So I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and she said, well, what she does is she schedules having moments of gratitude throughout the day. So instead of just doing it all at the end of the day, she thinks, okay, when I have my lunch, I'm just going to write down 3 things. And she said, if you do that, it's really easy to get to 10 by the end of the day. I was amazed at that. Like finding 3 at the end of the day is sometimes tricky for me, but like 10 during the day is quite an interesting one. But the other thing that she was talking, this made me laugh. The other thing that she was talking about was, because she was saying what you kind of need to do is you need to find new ways to do this, because even kind of keeping a gratitude journal can get a bit old and become a bit mundane. And that's, sometimes a bit of a killer for gratitude. she said sometimes what she does is she will challenge herself to be grateful for like just a really crazy object. Like, I don't know, I've got a jar of paper clips here on my desk. She would say, what you have to do is it's about kind of picking that jar of paper clips up for like every day for 3 weeks, and every day finding something new about it to be grateful for, and then tell your friends how great having a jar of paper clips on your desk is, because then it becomes infectious. So it sort of speaks to what you were saying about collective, but she said it really, really works, because you really have to work your brain to go, okay, well, I love the fact that I've got this. It's such a calming color on the top or something like that, So I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're mad, but that's fine. That's perfectly healthy to be a bit mad. And I suppose the thing with it is, one of the things that we often end up thinking is, I've got to find a new thing to be grateful for every day, and it's like a pressure, like, oh, I've got to think of new things, 3 more things every day. I've got to find 3 more things, and actually, that sort of plays into the same problem, that we're trying to look for what's changing and what's new, what's moving. And actually, it's okay to have the same things. So if you can think of 3 things yesterday and they're still there today, be grateful that you still have those 3 things that you're really glad you have. It's part of it is about that ritual of reminding yourself of the things that you otherwise would overlook, because there isn't any novelty there. There isn't anything unusual about them. And so I think some of it is that resisting the urge to try and keep looking for new things, and to understand the things that you have better, as you say, whether it's a paperclip jar or your relationship with family, or whatever it might be, trying to understand it on a deeper level, rather than skipping immediately, going, I've done that, I've been grateful for family, screw them now, I've got to be grateful for something else. Well, it's sunshine, no, it's not sunny, all right, I'm out, I'm done, I've got no ideas left, and so it takes a bit of the pressure off somewhat, and I think there's lots of ways of doing it, but it's not there's a right or wrong answer. It's really, part of it is about recalling things that make you feel good. It's not, you don't have to overthink it. It's just thinking about things where, actually, when I think about that, I think, oh, that's nice. It's simple as that.
And what about kind of putting yourself in that as well? So so almost kind of, I think one of the things is like, you can feel really insignificant, and kind of everything just feels a bit ordinary about your life. So is there any value in reminding yourself to be grateful for some of the things that you're good at? Or would that work as well? Does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it gets in a bit towards confidence and self-esteem and all those kinds of things. But I mean, one thing I've said on many occasions is, I'm grateful for my mind, because I use it to do all my work. If I didn't have this mind, I wouldn't do the things that I do. And so even when I feel down, even when I'm a bit all over the place, I still have to kind of stop and think, actually, there are good things here, even if I can use my intelligence to drive myself crazy and ruminate over things and worry about stuff. I can also use that same intelligence to keep my family safe, and to research areas, try and offer insights to people. It's the good and the bad kind of come together, and actually being overall grateful for the picture, I think, is helpful. So I think we often beat ourselves up about the bits we don't like about ourselves, but again, it's because we're thinking, I must improve this bit, I must get better at that, and miss the things where actually we have been improving, and we're better at these things than we used to be, and we've come a long way. Think how much better we all are at using Zoom. We used to be, we hadn't used these things, we'd use them a bit, but like the skills that we have acquired over the course of this year won't go away when the pandemic ends. They will still be with us, and we'll have gained all of that.
Yeah, that idea of measuring your progress or your growth is a really good one. I a few years ago, when I was going through a particularly tough time, one of the things that I found really useful to do was just in a very simple way, kind of record. I used to call it my weather. So I was like, what was my weather like, my internal weather like every day, and what was my energy level like, and what were the positives from that day. And it literally would just be a little drawing. So sometimes it would be like a flash of lightning, or a cloud, or a sun, draw a picture of a sun or something like that. And it was so useful to be able to see over the course of 3 weeks or whatever, how the weather had changed, or how the energy levels had changed. So that idea of measuring your progress, I think, can be really useful as well, and a really good way to kind of be thankful for those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, and often the things that were occupying us at the time, we can't remember when we look back. We remember different things. So looking back on what you wrote, things that you said in the past, and thinking, oh, I'd forgotten entirely about that, but it was all I thought about for 3 months, and now I can't remember about it at all. It's gone. That gives a bit of perspective on it. And I think generally thinking about perspective, mental distance, a lot of these techniques are about just trying to get a bit of a step back, a bit of reflective space. So a lot of it's just the process of making time to do that helps you to have a little bit of a gap, a little bit of a window to think about it.
Yeah.
And so whether it's taking reflective time or whether it's talking to other people, all of it's about getting a bit of perspective on your own experiences from either yourself in the past or other people around you now. It's all about understanding it better.
Yeah. So we've got a little bit of time here. So and we've got some people to share stuff with. So this is a moment maybe where I want to throw it out to everybody on the call and ask you to think about what might be hidden in plain sight. What is it that you are maybe thinking you might want to preserve from 2020? What do you want to take from 2020 into 2021? What do you want to take with you? If there's anything that you think, yeah, well, that's been quite good about 2020. I really want to kind of cultivate that. Brilliant stuff. And I think one of the things that can help you to think about those sorts of things are, I'm a real advocate for sort of like the power of the open question. I do this in a lot of the sessions that I work with people on. So, thinking about things, asking yourself a set of questions that begin with why, what, where, how, who, and, when, those sorts of things. So like what went well and when did you find real joy? And what was it that caused the real joy? Or, what needs to change? Or, those sorts of things. So just giving yourself sort of like 20 minutes to just scribble down some questions, even if you don't come up with the answers, can be a really useful way to do that. What can you do that would make you feel more connected maybe in 2021 is a really nice thing to think about as well. Some nice things coming in here. Andy, you from any of the other sessions that you're doing, are you capturing any of what other people are saying they want to take from 2020?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has been about working behaviours, I would say. I think there's obviously been a huge range. Some of our clients, they've been very affected economically. We've had to make a lot of people redundant, furloughed, the rest of it. So it's quite difficult for them to think, how could we make things, how could we improve the way that we work in the future? Because they're so in the state of trying to cling on to what we've got and trying to get back to the where they were. But for a lot of people, it's been more of a change in how they work. So a lot of our clients, it's been shifting to home working, changing the way that they meet, changing the way that they manage. And whilst a lot of it has been a struggle, there's been a huge investment gone into trying to learn how to do this, into the skills, into the technology. And actually people are starting to see some benefits to it, starting to think, actually, I do like spending more time with my family. I do like not having to commute. And then they're also missing things. They're also missing the commute because they were getting exercise that way, or they got out of the house and they're missing their colleagues. And so it's not a simple case of saying like we should all work from home forever, but we're starting to realize why we're doing these things, the kind of the underpinning of it. And so I would say a general aspiration for people seems to be that they want to work from home some of the time. And the question will then be, how do we arrange people to be in the office and still feel like the office? Because the point of the office is everyone's there at the same time. But if only 2/3 of the people are there, it won't be quite the same setup. So I think that's a lot of the question that's going on for people is, how do I preserve this flexibility but still collaborate, still see people, still be connected to people? It's essentially, it's a bit like the question with cinema at the moment is it better to watch a movie at home on Netflix, Disney Plus, HBO Max, or is it better to go to the cinema and have a collective experience, even though someone's eating very loud sweets in the corner? There's good and bad about both. And a lot of media is additive. A lot of this stuff, it's not saying we'll replace this with this other thing. It's just saying we've now got options. We've got more things we can do. And I think trying to hang on to that choice feels like something I really want to keep in next year.
Yeah, there's some lovely stuff coming in the chat as well. Sian saying the power of walking just one foot in front of the other to ease my mind in any weather. That's a really lovely thing. I think the other thing I was just thinking about this year, having asked everybody else that question about thinking about what you want to preserve, my mind kind of raced back to the very start of all of this. And, I just remember just thinking, wow, this is really nice. We're both at home together all day. We're actually spending quite a lot of time with each other. It felt like such a joy compared to us like always being in different parts of the country or, that sort of thing. But it's really easy how that just becomes normal. And then suddenly the thing that gave you joy in April is now like, oh, all we do is we're just at home with each other all the time, not so. it's maybe it's about going back a little bit as well and just trying to remember some of that. Some people on the other talks that we've done have talked about the euphoria that they almost felt at the start of it all, because it gave them this kind of new passion. And I think that maybe there's something in that. Somebody was talking about annual reviews. I think it was Adele, and I think that's a really, you obviously kind of move towards the thinking about an annual review at this time of the year, but perhaps more than ever this year, I think more people will be doing that. So maybe we'll come on to that a little bit later on and talk about how we can focus on that.
Yeah. I'm also noticing a question. I don't know if we should pick that up now because it's about gratitude. So because there's just a very interesting question from Maya. So I think social media is really interesting because it causes people to feel a pressure to be happy, but it also gives people an outlet for sharing joy. So it kind of it hits people in very different ways. So I think sometimes what you'll get is the doom scrolling effect of people just wanting to say how terrible everything is, and I'm certainly guilty of that. But I prefer that to scrolling through and seeing how everyone I know is making beautiful sourdough and going on holiday, and I'm not allowed to. So it's a bit of that question of how do you make it a collective experience rather than something that makes some people feel isolated is the tricky bit with it. So I think the struggle with gratitude is always trying to get the tone right in when you don't know people well. I generally prefer to share things that are going well with people I know well enough or that I can actually talk to, because it's always a bit of a risk if you put things out into the public domain like that of people taking them a different way. But I think so. The thing with social media is it's so varied. There are pockets of people being endlessly grateful to each other. There's the kind of Instagram lifestyle blogger thing, that's hashtag blessed all the time, and then there's the people who just want to tell you why Boris Johnson is an idiot. And I quite enjoy both, to be honest. I'm happy with the variety that it presents, but certainly the general thing with social media is I think the benefits of connecting with people seem to outweigh the negatives. So whilst there are examples of people who get into loops, feel very insecure because of it, and also online bullying, of course, the general pattern is people who've got access to the internet feel a lot less socially isolated than people without. And so the backdrop of this is that being able to connect with people in all kinds of different ways and be able to have someone to talk to about something that's gone well and something that's gone badly seems to be very good for us.
And I guess it's the power of just switching off from people that are toxic for you on social media, that sort of thing. I think sometimes you think, oh, I should follow that person just to get a different point of view or something like that. But actually, if in the same way that lots of us are turning off the news because we just don't want to be under attack from those sorts of things, maybe that's the thing to do as well. But I think what Maya was talking about there, what was quite interesting, was this, what she says, that she feels much better when she's able to kind of high five someone else. And that's the thing about gratitude, isn't it? That it's not kind of transactional or anything. It's actually, you get as much joy from the giving and the offering of support as you do from receiving it. I think sometimes better.
This is the word that I think gets used a lot without us stopping to think what it means is community. And community actually comes from the idea of shared wealth. And the principle of it is, if you get richer, that benefits me because we're in the same community. I don't need to then think, well, you've got money, I need some of that. It's because we have shared interest, because we have some solidarity between us, then we can all just be glad that each other are doing well and cheer each other on and do things for each other because we're in the same community. And I think we overlook the power of that a lot of the time. I think we should be advocating a lot more for the importance of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely the thing that just to go back to what we were talking about earlier about what you want to preserve from 2020, there's this kind of weird dichotomy for me, or that I find myself feeling part of a really big community this year, and yet I've never been less physically connected. I reckon I'm going to go a year without actually having a physical meeting with a client, probably, which just seems mad.
I had one. It was weird. We took a selfie. We were both so freaked out.
But at the same time, I think lots of people were saying connections in the chat there. I think that's probably going to, maybe for a lot of people, is going to be the word of the year, maybe, or unusual connections, or because we've found solace, haven't we, in kind of online communities across the year.
Well, even just this, I mean, we've said it before, but Julia and I have talked about working together for years and never quite found an opportunity to do it. But then actually this has provided a great way for us to hang out. Every month we do one of these. We talk a lot about planning them. We're doing other things together. And all of that has come from the lockdown and being suddenly forced to work in a different way. But it's been great. It's been really, really good.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to just mention was, this is something that I came across the other week from, it was sent to me by, I follow a woman called Sarah Young, And she pointed me to a thing called 6-Word Memoir, which is this amazing website from the States, set up a few years ago. And it just encourages people to write 6-word memoirs around a particular topic or a particular theme. And one of the things that she was doing was encouraging people to do a 6-word memoir about 2020. And I thought, what a great thing that is to do. You know, what a really lovely thing that's to do. So basically what you do is you come up with just 6 words that would be your memoir from 2020. So the challenge I wanted to offer was not to do it now in the chat, because you're probably going to want to think about this, because like if you've only got 6 words, there need to be 6 words that count. But maybe if people are willing to do that as a bit of a challenge over the next day or so, it would be really lovely to publish those maybe in a blog. So if you're up for doing that, just 6 words that in a sentence, or just, you know, just 6 random words together, would be your 6-word memoir for 2020. If you were able to email them to me, maybe if Matt or Abby can whack my email into the chat, that would be great. I had a think about this earlier, and mine at the moment, I think I'd probably change this because it's not amazingly profound, was thankful to be busy but tired. I had a look at some of the other ones that Sarah had been collecting, and they range from everything for something like feeling very blessed, hope for the world, to one which was a bit more bit more basic, which was bloody effing hell, just be done. So they could be, you know, very, very profound, or they could be, you know, just slightly tongue-in-cheek. But I thought it was a really lovely way to do. I mean, you know, so if anybody fancied it, look, cashing in on a worldwide pandemic from Sarah, great stuff. I mean, if you can do it in the chat, then great. But, you know, if not, then an email to me over the next couple of days would be great, and I'll try and publish those as a sort of little roundup to end the world. But I thought, what a really nice thing to do, 6-word memoir. It really forces you to think and sort of distill your thoughts about the year in quite a nice way. So that sort of brings me on to another thing, Andy, about this time of the year. So the other thing that we do, obviously, at this time of the year, a lot of us, is think about New Year's resolutions. I'm not great at these. I seem to set myself every year some, probably too many. It's probably part of the problem. A whole series of kind of goals that seem mainly doomed to failure, probably by the middle of January. I might get to February with some of them. So in recent years, what I've tried to do is to make it less about goals and more about intentions, just a more kind of general sense of how I want to be rather than things I want to achieve. It just seems to work a little bit better for me. So this idea of kind of like intentions being more sort of internal and about a general kind of atmosphere or mood or something like that, and goals feeling much more sort of concrete and target driven. They feel like quite different approaches. And so I wonder if you could talk about the difference there is in those approaches, and how they can motivate maybe different types of people or different personality types.
Yeah, I think the idea of intentions versus goals is quite a powerful concept, actually, because it taps into this question of what we can control. And the idea of having a goal, you can have a goal which might require you to be a different person, or for a whole load of things to go right in the world, and so you can end up having good intentions but not hitting your goal because other things have got in the way. Whereas if what you focus on is the intention, the alignment, the direction that you're trying to put yourself, the way that you're going to do things, it's a bit easier to be able to do it. If you say, I'm going to work in a way that is more careful, that doesn't mean I'm going to make no mistakes. You know, if you could have a goal of I'm going to make no mistakes this year, then you may still make a mistake, but you can work on being more careful. You can try and do that bit because you can control that bit. So I'm going to be more aware of my health. I'm going to think more about my mind. Even if you don't manage to put it all into action, you can still hang on to that intention, that thing that you're still continuing to do. The thing with New Year's resolutions, part of the problem with it is we often end up partly thinking that we're going to be different people. We're sort of setting a resolution for the person I wish I was, not the person that I am. And so there's not very joined up. It becomes an abstract thing, and there's not really a path to get there. And the intention may create a path towards that. But the other thing that I think is one of the things that really helped me to make sense of my own behavior and my habits and why resolutions weren't working is that we have a real disconnect between what we want and what we like. And we think in kind of, if you're just sort of thinking about it offhand, you might assume that we crave things because we like them a lot, and that's why, so the more you like something, the more you'll want it. And actually the two systems are different. The dopamine system, the serotonin system, they're separate systems in the brain. There's still not a great deal of understanding about exactly how they work, where the causes of it all are, but it does seem to be decoupled, which means that you can crave things that you don't actually like. And you can and you can also know that you would really like something but have no desire to go get it. And so we often end up setting resolutions based on what we know we would like if we did it, but we can't necessarily join that up with our dopamine system, our craving, our desire to do it. And so we go, I know I will feel really good if I eat loads of salad in January, but I seem to be eating fish and chips all the time because I'm just craving that. And as I eat it, I feel bad about myself because I think I shouldn't be eating so much fish and chips, but I'm still craving it. It's not to say that you can't like fish and chips. Obviously it's great, but I guess the thing is trying to identify how to build out your resolutions from what you actually do day to day, what you enjoy, and do more of those things, and connect the things that you like to these goals, to these aspirations. That rather than saying I'm not going to eat cake anymore, try and pick a food that's healthy that you like and eat more of that, and try and crave that in the way that you would do more of it. Build out from what's working.
And is that about building out from the why? So instead of focusing on the goal, just instead of thinking about the task or the activity, just think about the outcome. So, I want to be happier, or I want to be calmer, rather than I will do this or I will do that. Does that help?
Yeah, I think some of it's the why, but the why is still somewhat intellectual. So you need to know that why behind it, but you can have a really clear sense of why. You can be told by a doctor you need to cut out salt or you will get ill, and you have a very clear why, and you still eat salt. And so it's partly it's about joining the intellectual with the emotional. And how do you make that feel embodied, feel like something you're doing? And this is something, I mean, we should talk a bit about this in a business planning context, because the starts of all of our conversations were about looking after yourself to look after your business, and it feels good to bring it back to that. But I often, when I'm talking to people about business planning, it feels like it's very disconnected from what they actually do. And so there's lots of aspirations of, what we want to be as a business, we want to be doing this and this and this. But one of the things I say is, well, how do you actually spend your time at the moment? And so if your aspiration is to do this big grand thing, what do you actually do? Well, I spend 80% of my time talking to funders and stakeholders. So, okay, well, that's mainly your business activity then. And then you have 20% left to do some other things. But let's start from that. Let's work from, why is that the case? What is going on there? So, but I'm curious to know, I mean, because you start with why a lot in your conversations with creative people, isn't it? But how do you get people to join these things up? What works for that?
Well, it's interesting. Just to pick up on that, how you spend your time, that is one of the things, that's an exercise that I often get people to do. And it's the one that where you can just see that, just like the dawning realization on their faces. So there's a thing that I just call it the pies exercise. So you have a money pie and a time pie, and you divide that pie up based on how much you spend, what you spend your time doing at the moment. You carve up the pie, and so you might work out that 80% is spent on that and 20% is spent on that, and you spend only 5% on managing the finances or whatever. And then you think about, and you do the same for money. Where does your money come from? How do you earn your money? And it's quite a stark exercise to kind of see those two things next to each other. It works really well for creators because it's quite a visual way of doing it, but it gives you something to them to work from. Because if you realize that you're spending 80% of your time answering emails, but you call yourself a creative producer, or you call yourself this or whatever, and only 10% on being creative, then clearly something is a bit out of whack. So that can be a really useful thing to do. It's essentially just 4 circles, 4 pies. So that's a really useful thing. But to go back to the thing about the why, I think that it took me ages to realize that there was a connection, or there should be a connection, between the ambition that I had professionally and the ambition that I had for my life at large. So now when I do sort of business planning with creators, particularly people who are running small businesses, is to just say, okay, to start with what's important to you as a person. Because if the values that you have as a person aren't showing up in work, and the priorities that you have as a person aren't showing up in work, then there's going to be a tension between the two things. So that's where I start with a lot of people, and that's the just thinking about your life as a whole. And I find one of the things that's quite useful for people to do, to just try and make it less business planning and more about kind of inventing a future, is to, I think I've probably mentioned this before, but I often get people to write a postcard from the future, and you don't censor yourself. So you literally just you can pick a postcard off the wall, or you can just download a template, however works for you, and just write yourself a postcard from a particular moment in time, like 3 years ahead or something like that. And it can, and don't censor yourself. So if you start it writing about your business, but then actually it turns out to be about where you're living and what your family are doing, then that's what's important to you right now, and that's where you should start from. So that is a really useful exercise from a business planning point of view, because it stops you using all the kind of business planning language and getting stuck with all the jargon. So that's the thing, that the idea of kind of writing to yourself from the future can be really, really good. And then the other thing, some people I'm sure will have done that wheel of life thing that lots of coaches get you to do, where you identify 8 different parts of your life, family, relationships, friends, money, those sorts of things, but do the equivalent of that for work. And so think about, admin, how's the admin work? How much time am I spending on creative stuff? What about planning? Do I get time to go out and meet people? When do I get to write? All those sorts of things. And do the same thing, score where you are on each of those things. And that again gives you a sense of, well, that's what my life looks like at the moment. That's not how I want to be running my business. So those things can be useful as well, I think. But again, that thing that you talked about sharing that, it's great to be inspired by other people as well. So doing that, maybe forming a little buddy group with some of your kind of nearest and dearest friends or colleagues who are also freelancing or running their own businesses, become your own little support bubble. Can be really useful.
That sense of community, I suppose, people who want you to win and are glad when you have successes on the way is really important. Those learning groups. I mean, there's one thing I'd add to that as well, which is if you're writing a letter, a postcard from yourself 3 years from now, a really interesting question for me is to get people to think, and what was the turning point that made this future possible? Because often actually that's the bit that we struggle with. We think, I have an aspiration to do these things, but if you actually think, well, what would be the thing that you need to turn or adjust or change in your intentions now that points you at that? That's often the bit that people suddenly snap into life and go, oh yeah, okay, actually my turning point was I dropped this side of my work and I focused on this. Okay, I can, and that's that. I think that idea of what will your turning point be, I think is a really, really interesting question.
And again, it comes back to those sort of open questions. You could, the other thing that I talk in business planning sessions about is just the power of the question. So we often do this exercise where I get people to roll a dice, and if they roll a 1, they have to ask a why question. If they roll a 2, they have to answer a what question. So you start with your 6 words: why, what, where, when, how, and who. And you could do this online. We've been doing it on Zoom as well. There's a really lovely, if any of you want to roll a dice online, there's a brilliant little site called Roll a Dice, which enables you to do that. But, then you can just set yourself a challenge. And again, you could do this with a group of friends, just come up with a list of questions that between them really help you set your course. So, like, what do you need to feel more grounded or secure? What do you want to bring into the world next year? Those sorts of things. Or what do you want to be able to tell the world in 2021? Those sorts of things. Who could help you? All those sorts of things. So just give yourself the challenge. I mean, you could even do it with your kids, get them to roll the dice and then you then come up with the what or the why or the how question. It's just a fun way to do it. It makes it a bit more interactive. The other thing I just wanted to mention is not so much business planning, but it's more about kind of that sort of setting of intentions. And it speaks a little bit to doing it not on your own, because I think that's the other thing. It's great setting your own New Year's resolutions, but if they're completely out of step with what your partner or your family members are wanting to do. So if you've said, right, we're going to eat salad every day, but like nobody in your house likes salad, then that's going to be a really solitary dinner for you, isn't it? So one of the things that I've done for the last few years is we just call it a bunker weekend. So we go away as a family for a weekend, and we all have the same questions, like what's important to you, what would you like to do more of, what's been great about this year, where do you want to travel, what would you like to do, how would you like to spend your weekends, whatever the important questions are to yourself. And you all just go away somewhere, or you shut yourself off in go to the garden shed, or if you can't get away anywhere, and you do them independently, and then you come together and share them, and then you set some joint intentions as a family. And that works really, really well. And lots of friends of mine, we've sort of talked about it and now do it. And that there's something about that is really good as well, because it's collective. You're held to account. You're on it. You have to do it because you've all committed to it. So there's something quite nice about that, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that people do for their minds tend to be quite, like, in a formal setting, quite solitary. So mindfulness meditation, therapies, a lot of it tends to focus on going inwards. And I'm a big advocate for more collective experiences that help boost our mental health and well-being. That trying to get looking at around and seeing what other people are experiencing, connecting our experiences to those of other people, feeling normal, and talking to each other about what we need. And I don't think we have enough opportunities to do that. And maybe this year will give us the platform to do that. So one thing, for example, is doing a Mindapples card with your family or with friends. So that those collective experiences. I used to love it when we'd do Mindapples tree installations at festivals, and you'd see groups of friends coming up and doing theirs together and reading each other's and talking about it. And my favorite one was when married couples do it. And so we had a married couple in their 60s came up to our tree, filled in their cards, and then compared notes. And all I heard was one of them saying, I put you and you didn't put me. And you put the dog. So I'll give these people some privacy at this point.
That's really good. That's really good. It reminds me a little bit of when you go to festivals and you just see the trees with the ribbons where people have written down just lovely messages about what they want to see in the world, that sort of thing. So there are all sorts of things that you can do. The other thing is, I know a lot of people do this, is like writing a letter from your future self. And there's even that website, isn't there? There's that Future Me website where you can email them your letter, and then they'll send it back to you like in a year's time or whenever you wanted to. And I know quite a few of my friends find that quite useful because it just pops up back in their inbox and reminds them of all the things they said they were gonna change. A friend of mine last year I remember this now, just surprised me on New Year's Day by just saying, what's your word of the year gonna be? Like, if you want to distill, we talked about 6-word memoir, but he was like, what's your word of the year? And I was like, wow, I've never really thought about that. And I went back and I had a look at it because I just remember it being really powerful. And it was contentment. That was going to be my word of the year for 2020. I thought that's a good thing to kind of aspire to. But one word, that's like a real challenge, but it's quite a nice, quite a nice thing.
I was thinking mine might be collaboration. Because actually this is a huge global thing and we've all worked together, and actually we might be getting close to beating it. And I think that's quite an inspiring thing, the idea that there are these vaccines that are being created and this huge effort all around the world to try and keep people safe. I think celebrating that would be really good. By the way, these 5-word, 3-word, 2-word, 6-word things is really reminding me of I remember going to a comedy night and they did a competition for 5-word film reviews. And I came second with Life is Beautiful, which was Auschwitz but funny. No, wait. But the one that won was the best, and it stuck in my mind because it was for Labyrinth, the old Bowie movie, and it was the 5-word review was Bowie crotch distracts baby rescue.
Great, really good. Well, I think the 6 words thing is tricky, isn't it? So I can see a couple of people did it in the chat, but it'd be great to hear those. Andy, we've talked a little bit about habits. They've sort of cropped up, and it feels like they're the kind of it's really what we need to think about now. So, the moving from an intention to like making the actual change, that to me feels very bound up in the forming of new habits. But that habit forming is really, really hard. So what's going on when a bit like you say, you kind of scupper yourself, you want to build these new habits? What's going on there, and what can we do to retrain our minds? What's the best way to kind of keep or form a new habit?
Yeah, it's interesting actually that when we think about where I want to be in 3 years' time, we don't often think about how we want our minds to be or what habits we want to be developing. But actually, that may often have more of an impact on our happiness than the big ticket items. The how we live is often more of a contributor to our well-being. So if you're thinking, where do I want to be in 3 years' time? Well, actually, some of it should be, I want to develop these skills, these habits. I want to be, I want my mind to be this kind of way. And the bit that I think we often get stuck on is the amount of work involved, the effort, the energy involved, particularly when we're all busy. That actually it takes a lot of investment to build a habit. The way it works, what a habit is, the role it plays in our systems is they're very useful, but they're energy savers. And so whatever you do regularly and intensively, your mind will go, oh, you seem to be using those processes a lot. I'll make them faster for you. And we get faster and faster in the same way that you can get better and better at playing an instrument. You can also get better and better at checking your email. And so we start learning these habits by doing them repeatedly, but often they happen without us really noticing. So rather than it being just, let's think about building some habits, it starts with taking stock of what habits you have been learning, what have you developed, what have you trained your mind to do. And some of it is about then unpicking those and replacing them with a new habit. And the problem is basically habits are a type of memory. So it's just an automatic loop that happens when you see a familiar situation. You go, oh, I've got a system for that. I'll do that thing again. And so they work like other memories in that it's very hard to train yourself to forget them. So if you were to say, right, I'm going to forget that Paris is the capital of France, even just the action of setting that intention means you have reminded yourself. And so the memory gets stronger the more you think about not doing it. And so all you can really do is overlay a stronger memory over the top. So you need to think, what are the things that you want to do more of? What are the things that you want to practice and get better at, and practice and overlay them until they become such fresh memories that they become the thing that pops into your mind rather than the other thing that you used to do. But it takes a lot of work, and it's the reason what I've noticed people are just very tired, particularly we talked about this over the summer. There was a sort of real fatigue that was setting in around sort of August, September time, but it's because it's been a huge experiment in mass behavior change that we've all suddenly had to learn new habits, and we've been having to do our day-to-day jobs and work and life and all these extra things that we're trying to do, and also relearn how to go to work, how to go to the shops, how to see friends, these things that we had habits for. We've suddenly had to throw all that out. So we're just expending so much energy. And now that we've got better at that, we can relax a bit because we've got used to it, but things keep changing. So we keep having to do it again. But it's a great opportunity to say, right, one of the things I'm going to do is put a load of effort into learning some habits that will make my life easier, make me more effective, look after my health more. If you're going to change your habits anyway, put the hours in and change them into something that you think is actually the mind you want to have in 3 years' time.
And that thing that you said about systems, I think is, I'm quite practical. So I'm like, okay, well, I get the theory that you practice stuff. We all know that's how you do it. The more you do something, that's what a habit is, isn't it? It's just something you do without thinking about it because you've done it so many times. But on a practical level, the idea of having a kind of system in place or making it as simple as possible for you to do that thing, I think feels really important. And or like taking away the things that might knock you off course. So it's a bit like, when you want to lose weight, don't have any biscuits in the house, that sort of thing. So presumably it's just also very practical steps to make the thing that you want to do as easy as possible. That's something that we should be thinking about as well.
Yeah, we do need a bit of willpower. You need to practice it and force yourself from time to time, but we really overestimate how much willpower we have. We think, I have an iron will, I will resist all of this, and then we give in completely almost immediately. And your mind doesn't need it to be effortful. It's not like it will embed the habit more if it's a big pain to do it and you're really struggling. You just need to find any way that you can to repeat that action. And so if you can set up a situation where it is really easy, or there is only one option and it's the thing that you want to do more of, then your mind will learn the habit and you don't necessarily need to make the effort. So a lot of people, for example, with languages say that they struggle making the effort to practice the language, but then when they went to the country where they speak the language all the time, they suddenly learned it really quickly. It's not because they suddenly got more willpower, it's just that it was easier to do that particular thing. So seeking out the situations where it's the natural easiest thing to do is this thing you want to do more of, and turning off the opportunities to do the things you want to do less of actually is often a more sustainable way to build habits than just sitting there going, I'm going to resist the biscuits, I will not eat any biscuits. Oh, I'm thinking more and more about biscuits. The more I think about not eating biscuits, the more I crave a biscuit. It's a terrible trap.
Yeah. And that's where I guess having other people on board helps as well. So doing things with other people. So if you're going to take up running, run with a friend, that sort of thing as well. The power of community again.
It's been the heart of a lot of the behavior change during the pandemic, is there's a critical mass where everyone starts doing it, so it's odd not to do it. So masks in supermarkets, we weren't doing that for months, and then suddenly it became weird not to do it and you felt odd, so suddenly we've got a habit of doing that. And it's not because we developed more willpower, it's because we suddenly had a collective shift going, right, we're all going to do that now. Whereas before, remember when it was just hand washing, when we were talking about saving the world through washing our hands? It seemed like such innocent days. But it's those things where the more of it you've got around you, the more you just get carried along by the momentum. And a lot of the habits we have are just because everyone does it, so we do too, and we don't really know why. It's just what we do. That's a lot of the essence of culture.
Yeah. I want to just again open it up to everyone in the chat and just ask people to think about what new habits they might be keen to develop in 2021. you know, and what you might want to add to your daily routine. We've talked about, you know, it's practice. You know, I realised earlier this year it was a year since I'd actually practiced anything. Think about the amount of practicing you do when you're a kid. You're just always practicing something, aren't you? And I was like, I don't practice anything. So what are the new habits that you might want to develop in 2021? What might you want to add to your sort of daily routine or way of working? More exercise. Dee is saying I'm about to get a dog in 2021, so that's going to get solved for me because I'm going to have to take the dog for a walk every day. So that's very exciting. But I'd love to hear if you've got any new habits that you are hoping to develop in 2021. It's always great to see those and maybe inspire other people. And while people are thinking about that, Andy, I suppose I have to ask you this question to kind of wrap up. What would you say are the key things that we should do if we want to make looking after our minds sort of a bit better, a new habit in 2021? If that's what we want to do, if that's the habit we want to form, what are some of the things that we should do?
Good habits for your mind. I also just shared a tip sheet link, which is to our site where you can download that, which has got a bit of the summary of the research on habits and the habit loop. So I hope that will be useful for people. And I suppose a lot of the things that we talk about doing for our minds are very personal. So there are some obvious things that are useful generally, like getting plenty of sleep and drinking water, eating healthily, getting natural light, getting some exercise, making sure that you take time to talk to other people or connect in some way. So there are the building blocks of good mental health that are important, particularly for looking after your brain, looking after your underlying health in general. The bits that I think beyond that, the things that we do are quite personal. So a lot of it is more habits about how we respect those things and make time for them, whatever they are. It's not about saying you should do more of this. It's more about saying make time for those things which feel like your sorts of things. And the particular things to look for are things which help you feel more mastery, more autonomy, more purpose, things where you feel good at something where you feel useful to other people, something where you can do something that feels like it taps into your values, something that makes you feel like you're living in a way that is true to the person you want to be, the world that you want to create. And a lot of this ends up being the things where we kind of know them when we experience them, but then we end up doing lots of other stuff and actually trying to just make more time for these things, which we think, actually, whenever I do that, I come away feeling more myself. And so it might be meditation, walking, spending more time with people, might be things in work where you want to use your skills, try and learn more, talk to people. But I think that's the kind of big theme for me, is all of these things, trying to find ways of making myself feel like, oh yeah, I'm doing something useful. I'm being good at that. If my 6 words, the best I can come up with is I'm just trying to be useful. It just feels like that's all I've been doing all year to stay sane, is just try and be useful to people. The other bit that's more of a personal one for me is, I think the thing that we have done a lot is slow down. And we will be faced with a point where we need to speed up again. Some of us have been running at breakneck pace all the way through. Others have been sort of stopped without our desire to. But as things start to spin up, as we start getting more and more changes, things reopening and all that, we will be faced with the question of, do we want to go back to being as busy as we were? Or do we find ways to give ourselves a bit of time? And I think for me, the big habit I'm trying to practice is the habit of just asking myself, actually, do I need to rush? Because I feel like I need to all the time. I need to do this as quickly as possible, but I always have 5 minutes to stop and take a breath and think about things a bit. I always have 10 minutes to just pop out and stick my head out the window and see some sunshine or have a conversation with someone. And I often felt in the past like I didn't, like I never had time for any of these things. But actually, it turns out we do. We have lots of time for these things, and we need to remember that.
Yeah, that's a great one. Do I need to rush? It's a really simple question, isn't it? Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thanks for some of those habits that are coming in as well. Adele saying she wants to meditate. Yeah, meditation and yoga. So yeah, it's great to see some of those coming in. I'm not sure if there are, Abby, I was just going to ask you to switch on your camera and join us in case there are any other questions that people have been putting in the chat. I've been trying to keep an eye on it, but
I don't think there's been any more questions since the social media question earlier. It's just any suggestions for discussion.
if anybody has got a question, feel free to pop it in the chat for Andy and I now, and we'll try to tackle it before we get to the end of the session. If there are any questions or comments that you want us to ask. While we're waiting for that, thanks, Abby, that's brilliant, thank you. A final interaction, a kind of fun one really, I suppose. This is what I've done for the last few years, or when I was sort of able to buzz around everywhere, was each December I would run around the country and try and get important people from the creative sector to stand next to a Christmas tree somewhere in their location and tell me to camera what they would like to ask Santa Claus for, Father Christmas for the creative sector in 2020, in the following year. And so I've not been able to do that this year. So you guys are my proxies. You are the important people from the creative sector that I want to kind of throw open that question to today. So this is the final interaction in the chat that I would love you to get involved in, is if you were writing your letter to Father Christmas and you were able to ask for one thing for the creative sector in 2021, what would you ask Father Christmas for? What would be on your Father Christmas list for the creative sector? More collaboration to help harder reach people. Yeah, thanks, Steve. Financial stability and support. That sounds good. That's great. If you're able to pop those in, that'd be great. We'll come back to those. Meanwhile, oh, sorry, Andy. Go on.
So I was going to say, I think the thing for me is I would like the huge outpouring of affection and appreciation for the cultural and creative industries that we've experienced by being bored during lockdown and realizing how much good stuff there is, to turn into actually finding a way to pay all the people who make those things, because clearly we need them, and we should be able to figure out if there's that much appreciation, that much love for all the work that's being done. We should be able to figure out how to sustain.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That's great. Yeah.
There's a question as well from Maya about the wheel pie idea as well. So I don't know if you can say a bit more about that.
Let's just have a little look.
Just asking for a bit more on the wheel and pie idea.
Oh, on the wheel. Yeah. So the pie thing is really simple. So you just start with a pie and you divvy up your time, how you spend your time at the moment. So you make a little sort of pie chart out of it, slices of the pie. And you do the same for how you earn your money. Where does all your money come from? So you have two pies that represent what things look like now, what your time looks like now, your working time, and what your income looks like now. And then you think, how would you like them to be? So, what would you like those pies? You redraw them for the future, for like a year's time or 2 years' time. You set yourself a sort of time limit. And that gives you a target. And then you think, okay, well, how am I going to get from spending 10% of my time on practicing or jamming or rehearsing or whatever it is that you have? If I want to make that 40%, what changes do I need to make? So that's a really simple sort of visual representation to do that. And then the Wheel of Life, if you go online and just Google Wheel of Life, you'll find lots of sort of graphics for that. And what that does from a life point of view is it asks you to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 on a kind of wheel with spokes, different areas of your life. So your family, your relationship with friends, work, fun time, those sorts of like leisure time, that sort of thing. But you can also do that for work. So you can think about all the different aspects of your role. So whether that's, creative time, planning time, networking, thinking, writing, whatever all of those things are. And again, similar things, sort of draw it on a wheel with some spokes, rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, and then just think, okay, well, what would it take me to get me from like 5 out of 10 on that to 7 out of 10? And so they're both about sort of just helping you think about the distance that you might travel and or that you want to travel, and how you might do that. So it's quite a useful exercise to do that.
There's one as well that you can use for values and personal time. So you can do it for work, but you can also ask, how do you spend your time out of work and how do you spend your money? And that tells you a lot about what you actually like and what you care about and what you value.
Yeah, absolutely.
Spoiler, there's more cake and Netflix in it than you would think. It's not so much great cultural works and doing things for the poor. It's often like, I eat a lot of chips on the sofa.
Yeah. But whatever gets you through, that's the thing, isn't it, at the moment? So whatever works for you. So if it's rom-coms and chips on the sofa or whatever it is, doesn't matter, does it? The
Nothing wrong with that.
To get here. The important thing is to get here. Great stuff. Thank you. Sarah, I wonder if you would be up for just sharing your screen, just to give us a little kind of work in progress of your illustrations. So those of you that are new, we have the fabulous Sarah Singleton joins us for these calls, and what she does is she tries to keep track of everything that comes in on the chat and everything that Andy and I talk about, and turn it into a little graphic illustration that you can go back to afterwards if you're kind of more minded to look at a visual than listen to the recording again. They're always a thing of beauty. So I think Sarah's just going to share that. We'll just have a quick look at that. Oh, this is the point where I always think we need to talk more slowly, because poor Sarah's fingers have to fly around the page at some point. Wow, look at that. So great to see the pies in there.
Well, I tried my best. They're a little bit dodgy, but then bunkers. She comes up with the word bunkers, and I'm like, what? So it's Teletubby Hill there. Look, that's the bunker.
Brilliant.
Anyway,
great stuff. That's great. So we'll be sharing that with you all afterwards. Thanks, Sarah, for that. Thank you. A couple of other things just before we wrap up. We've got some of you will know that we like to try and do something special for the end of these talks. So do stay hanging on just for a second. We've got something quite fun to do at the end of today. But I just wanted to also mention some good news that we had last week, which is that we applied to the Arts Council England, to do more of these talks and a few other things next year. And we were really lucky, and our application was successful. We found out last week. So we will be back next year, which is very exciting. And we will be doing not just some talks, but also creating some web resources, a toolkit, that sort of thing, and also doing some training around this. So some one-day training sessions on sort of business planning, how to pivot, and how to protect your mind. And also some more action learning sets. I think some of the people here have been in our action learning sets that we've been running this year. So we're really pleased and grateful, and want to say thank you to the Arts Council and to the National Lottery for supporting that. We're excited to be back next year. To make sure that what we do next year hits the mark and does what you need it to do, we've put together a survey. I think Abby's going to share the link to that. It's a little survey that just asks you to tell us a little bit about what life's like for you at the moment, what it's been like for the last year, some of your thoughts about what might happen next year and what you might need help with. It will take probably about 10 minutes to do, and it's just so useful for us. If you can do that, just cut and paste the link there and do that sometime over the next few days. That would be so helpful. It just means that we know where to focus our attentions next year. And it also helps us lobby as well. It asks a few questions about what it's like to be a freelancer in the arts at the moment. It means that we can go back to funders and DCMS and people like Abby at the Fed can do that as well. So it helps from a lobbying point of view. So we'd be so grateful if you could spend a bit of time doing that and pass it on to your friends as well. The more the merrier, definitely, for this situation. Brilliant. Thank you very much. I feel like I should do some thank yous before we finish. So thank you, Andy, again, for being so brilliant today and for sharing some insights. Thank you, Abby, for looking after the chat. Thank you, Sarah, for your illustration, and thank you, Matthew, for looking after all of the tech. The big finish, as I ask you to turn your cameras on, everyone, if you're happy to do that. We felt that we needed to mark the kind of Christmas season and the end of the year in our little goodbye today, and we thought who better to help us do that than Slade. It's obviously not Christmas without Slade. And it turns out that you now have a reason to make them part of your new year as well. They've done an amazing, I say amazing, it probably needs to come in inverted commas, rendition of Auld Lang Syne. So we're going to attempt something completely ridiculous now, which is a kind of collective Auld Lang Syne moment. Think of it as a sort of practice for the Zoom New Year that you're all going to have in a couple of weeks' time. Abby's going to pop the lyrics in the chat. We're going to keep you all on mute, and we're going to have Noddy sing us in, and then he's going to give us a really helpful cue. He says something like, sing it. And at that point, I want you all to, you know how we normally do this kind of the link? I want you all to join your arms so that we form a lovely Auld Lang Syne group like this. And you can all go completely mad in your houses singing Auld Lang Syne. I don't know if you've any of you there with other people. They're going to wonder what on earth is going on a Wednesday morning on the 16th of December. But you can all go completely mad. There's also a bit where there's a really good cue where it goes really fast. So at that point, we need to go much faster. So let's see if we can do that. It's a chance to kind of lip sync away to Slade. Matt, I'm going to ask you if you can cue Noddy for us, please.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and the days of old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness, yeah, for the sake of old lang syne. Sing it.
Ready to sing?
For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness, yeah, for the sake of old lang syne. Old acquaintance take a hand and never more to mind. Should old acquaintance take a hand for the sake of old lang syne? For old lang syne, yeah, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness, yeah, for the sake of old lang syne. For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness, yeah.
Brilliant, people. I feel like you should unmute yourselves now. Well done.
Oh dear.
Thank you for
That was
going
terrible.
with
Well
that.
done, everyone.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Happy Christmas, everyone.
And to you,
Happy New
Julia.
Year.
And
To
to you,
you.
Andy.
Happy
Thank you, everyone.
Christmas.
To everybody else out there.
Yes.
We'll see
Yeah,
you
thanks
all
everybody.
It's been
in
great. It's been really nice to
2021.
see you all this year. And look forward to more next year.
Take care, everyone.